So it's great to be back again here at the Unity in Merritt Island. I think, Madeline, we've been here quite a few times over the years. I think back when Sue Bailey was the minister, I remember. Anybody here back then? Nobody. Oh, yeah, somebody. and then Rose, of course, a few times, and with Reverend Beth over at Unity in Melbourne. So I always like to remember and remind, I guess, all of us that we're very fortunate, I think, to be here within the Unity movement, because I think in many ways Unity is one of the healthiest spiritual movements on planet Earth, in the sense that it's really founded on a very pure foundation. Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. How many of you have ever been to Unity Village? Oh, good, quite a few. So if you haven't been there, it's kind of like going to Mecca. Once in your life, get to Unity Village if you can. Because it's a beautiful place, a wildlife sanctuary. They've got 1,000 acres and ponds, and the Unity Prayer Tower, and where people are continually sending out prayers for the welfare of humanity and all living beings. It's a very inspiring place based on spiritual healing and the truth of all the world religions. I mean, Christianity, but not denying the wisdom in the other traditions. So there's this inclusive kind of a sense with Unity that I think is very important. It kind of gets us over that narrow sense that we have the one right answer, and you better believe how we say it, or you're going to go a bad place. We have this feeling that it's really up to us, actually, that we can make the effort. Each one of us has the responsibility. And Charles Fillmore is kind of famous for emphasizing this over and over again, the idea that each one of us can go straight to headquarters, right? You've heard him say, we can each go straight to headquarters. For him, that was easy. That meant, I'll just ask Myrtle, see what she thinks. And for me, it's easy too. I can just ask Madeline. But for the rest of us, we've got to kind of develop our connection with our inner wisdom, what I call our inner guidance system. That's what we'll be talking about this afternoon, our intuition. And this is something that is so, I think, important and helpful. I think we probably all know that there's no greater gift we can have in our life than an inner knowing that we can learn to connect with and rely on, that'll help us to unfold and live our life, our unique life. It doesn't mean that our life will be a bed of roses, that we won't have any problems ever, but it does mean that we'll be living our life. And there's something inherently joyful and satisfying in that, even with the challenges. So it's really about living authentically and allowing ourselves to fulfill our purposes, our unique purpose for this lifetime. And no one can ever tell somebody else what their purpose is, because that's something that we each have at a very deep, profound level of our being. And one of the other foundational teachings in Unity, and really in the perennial philosophy that pervades all wisdom traditions on planet Earth, is the idea that we're not this body. We're not this physical body. Y'all understand that, right? This is something really critically important to just remember and keep reminding ourselves of that. We tend to, we live in a society where we're taught that this is what we are. We were born, and we have this body that we identify with, and our name, and our accumulation of thoughts and feelings and memories and likes and dislikes and everything else we're proud of or we're not so proud of, whatever it is. And then we're going to die and so forth. But the whole idea is really in the wisdom traditions of the earth, that we are infinite and eternal consciousness that was never born and will never die. We're basically functioning through a vehicle. And it's kind of interesting, in the Buddhist tradition, going way back, for hundreds of years, they never had the idea of having a statue that kind of shows the body of the Buddha, right? We have that everywhere. Everybody, you have a Buddha, statue. But for years, they had three main symbols. One was the wheel, with the 8 spokes, sort of for the Eightfold Path. One was the tree, because Buddha was enlightened under a tree. And trees have tremendous spiritual symbolism of connecting heaven and earth and so forth. And then the third one was a footprint. And I like that one, especially because when we go out here to the beach and you walk along and you see a footprint in the sand, you know better than to go up to the footprint and go, well, good morning, George, how are you doing, right? That's just a footprint. It's not the being that made the footprint. So I like to remind everybody, this is a footprint waving. You can't see me. We never see each other. We are an incorporeal, eternal spirit. And so when we begin to quiet our mind, we can begin to not just know that intellectually, but begin to actually get a deeper sense of that. How many of you have a regular spiritual practice that you do on a daily basis? Anybody? Good. I think that's the foundation. That's critically important, a regular daily practice. It's like anything else. I remember when I was a kid, and I was the oldest child, and my father was a good piano player. He had his own dance band before they were married. And anyway, so I would see him playing, and I'd say, Daddy, I want to play the piano. And he'd say, yeah, all you have to do is practice. And then at one point I started taking lessons, first from him, and then I got a real teacher, and then I was a church organist in high school. And I learned you've got to practice. If you're going to show up on Sunday morning and play the hymns, you better know how to play them. But it was, I had to write it on the board, 45 minutes. I did it every day in the kitchen. But I'm so grateful for that, because really a discipline is essential to unfolding an ability. And Madeline and I have kind of modified the word discipline. We've changed the letter D to BL, blisscipline. Because it really is. When we actually make an effort to unfold something, to develop an ability, at first it may be somewhat of a grind. You think, I have to do that again. But with time, it unfolds into, doorways open, and it brings freedom and joy. I mean, I'm so glad that I put all that hundreds of hours or whatever it was practicing the piano when I was a kid, and now I can sit and just play. And it's tremendous freedom in that. And so we're talking about spiritual practices. And the foundational spiritual practice, really, and we'll talk about this more this afternoon, is learning to bring our mind into the present moment in a relaxed and focused way. Because essentially we're taught in our society to be always somewhere else, trying to change somebody, wishing they would have, or we would have, or if they wouldn't have, or what I would have, or whatever. We're just continually planning, and we're always somewhere else. So the whole idea is to begin to connect with life in the moment and people where they are, and quiet our mind and begin to get a direct experience that we are what makes this possible. And that actually is the key in many ways to spiritual healing. We can heal anything, quite honestly. Our physical body is truly a manifestation of our consciousness. And so when we quiet our mind and we begin to get a taste that we are not just this body, but we're consciousness, then we begin to also see others the same way. We see beyond just whatever their age, race, shoe size, whatever it is we're looking at. We see the being. And when we see a being, we become healers, really. We see the best. We see the eternal beauty that they are. And that's a great gift to give. We don't have to say anything. We can radiate a feeling of loving kindness, compassion, joy, and harmony and peace while we're standing in line or driving our car to the people around us. And it doesn't just help them, it helps everyone. And it comes back, it boomerangs, and we feel better too, we're happier. So this is the great gift, I think, of unity, is the understanding that the world in many ways is a mirror of our consciousness. And we can fight with other people and try to make them better so we have a happier life. But as Charles said, people are a mirror of us in many ways. And when we actually change ourselves, then we find other people change also. And so this, I think, is really the underlying idea that we'd like to share this morning, the idea that we have this inner guidance system that naturally begins to get stronger the more we can quiet our mind, be focused and be present, and begin to distinguish the thoughts that come in from the cultural program and the thoughts that come in from our true nature. And so one of the sayings I like quite a bit was by Krishnamurti. He said, it's not a good idea to be well-adjusted to a very sick society. So we kind of laugh when we hear that, but we know there's some truth to it, that our society could be healthier, could be more harmonious, could be more awake and kind, compassionate, and all of that. But we like to be well-adjusted. We like everybody to like us. We like to eat what they eat and say what they say and think what they think. We don't want to be rejected. But we realize also that as spiritual beings, we're here in many ways to help create a better world, right? To help have a more awakened, harmonious world for our children and grandchildren. So to do that, we need to be different, in a sense. We need to be able to step out and and speak our truth and create this opportunity. And when we do that, I think we create a field that encourages everyone else to do that. So each one of us, when we're connected with our intuition and living our life, we naturally encourage others to do the same thing. We don't have to wag our finger at them. We just naturally bring the best out of them. Because really, in many ways, when we're little kids, we're like sponges. We land somewhere, here, China, Africa, whatever, in a certain body, and then we're like a sponge, and we soak up. Their language becomes my language. Their food becomes my food. Their way of thinking becomes my way of thinking. So we accumulate all this, and in many ways, the layers keep adding more and more. We get educated more and more, which in many ways means we get indoctrinated more and more. And we take in more ads from Walmart and more this and that and everything the minister said, not Reverend Beth, all the other ministers, they all said, take all this in. And we just keep accumulating. And the thing is, if we're being propelled, really, in many ways. Like if we get up in the morning and we do this, we do that, we say this, we say that, we go along through our day, what is propelling us? It's one of two things. It's either that huge accumulation of cultural programming and all our memories and our self-identity that we've built up, and that just keeps us going, or it's our connection with the eternal dimension of ourselves that's guiding us. And I would say, we could be going to Sunday school every Sunday to church and everything and just be propelled by the program, and there's really no spirituality in that. We're just basically a programmed thing. But as soon as we connect with the eternal nature and let that start guiding us, then the spiritual life is now unfolding. Now we are actually being a force for kindness and compassion in our world. And it may mean questioning all the official narratives in our society. It may be uncomfortable, but it's so fantastic to have a community where we support each other in that. And that's, I think, the vision, really, that Charles and Myrtle Fillmore had, and that so many thousands and really millions of people have been feeding and keeping it alive. And it's so precious to keep that going for the next generation. There's no greater gift, I think, we can give to the world than these two things. Number one, to make an effort to actualize these ancient wisdom teachings that are the unity teachings in our own life. And then number two, to support a community of people who are doing that. Because without a community, it's very difficult. But the community serves as a continual reminder of these ancient wisdom teachings, which we need, because as soon as we leave here, we're bombarded with a bunch of lies, really. I mean, you'll turn on the news, look at the billboards. I mean, there's a lot of misinformation. Just the underlying assumptions are contrary to the spiritual truths. So this is a very precious community. So the final thing I want to just emphasize before I wrap it up here is just the idea that each one of us, if you found your way through the door, you have a story. And your story is precious in the sense that it's your pathway that has brought you to this point. So even if there's things you think that wasn't good, in a way, if now is good, then it must have been good, right? I mean, everything brings us there, and that's an important thing to understand. Now, I just want to briefly mention my own story because it's kind of, I think, somewhat illustrative of some of the principles. When I was a kid, I was born and raised in New England, in Massachusetts, Concord. I landed in Concord, Massachusetts, and it's kind of a nice place just because there was a lot of history. There was the Revolutionary War that happened in 1775. Hardly a man is now alive that remembers the famous day and year of the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. And my father, every April 19th, which is Patriots' Day, would get dressed up in his Minuteman outfit and get the gun off the wall, and we'd all celebrate the revolution, If you have a system of tyranny, you don't have freedom of speech and the freedom of assembly and freedom of religion, you better abolish that system because we have to have freedom. I mean, really, that's really important. So I was kind of raised in this cradle of liberty back in Concord, Massachusetts. And then later, in the 1800s, there was the transcendentalist whole thing. So I learned to swim in Walden Pond. I was born in Emerson Hospital. I went to Thoreau School and Alcott School, So there was the whole transcendentalist movement, and that was really very important for the unity movement because they were really the first people to bring in a lot of these teachings from Asia that enrich, I think, in many ways, the Western spiritual tradition, the Christian-based tradition. Like the teaching, for example, from the Hindu tradition that God is equally female as male, or the idea from the Taoist tradition of God as this universal principle that we can learn to live in harmony with, or the idea from the Buddhist tradition of God as mind, with a capital M, and that our mind is the divine mind, in a sense, that we can connect with that divine aspect of ourselves. And these ideas really help to spur on Christian Science and unity and many other traditions. But I think, what we call New Thought. So I was born in that, but I remember I didn't really know too much about it till I went away to college in Maine, Colby College, in the early 1970s, and I started really reading Thoreau and Emerson, and that led me to Walt Whitman, which I thought he was really inspiring, and then also some of the I started studying meditation and yoga, and then I read a book that I really liked, which you may have heard of. It's not that well known, but it's called Cosmic Consciousness, written by 1890 by Richard Buck from Canada. But basically, the main point is very straightforward. It's that most people, he said, live in a state of self-consciousness. We basically care about ourselves. That's the most important. And maybe, our family and a little group. But he said certain rare individuals had been able to escape from that and attained what he called cosmic consciousness. People like the Buddha and Jesus and some of the great disciples and saints and sages and mystics and poets from the world religions, both men and women. And he gave examples of these people. And he said the main thing is that these people have attained a moral elevation, an intellectual illumination, and a spiritual awakening, so that they've lost this sort of petty narrow-mindedness, and they live basically just to bless the world with a sense of love and kindness and compassion and great wisdom. And so he said, it is the destiny of every human being to attain cosmic consciousness. That's our basic purpose here. And that everything else is pretty much a distraction. And so I really got interested in this idea. And so I remember going home on the breaks and telling my parents, Mom and Dad, we're here to attain cosmic consciousness, right? And we're not just here to make money and, all that kind of stuff. And I remember my father saying, well, it's actually costing me quite a lot of money to send you to this college you're going to. How's this going to help you get ahead in the world? And anyway, but they were understood. I mean, my father actually taught me to play the piano. My mother was an artist. So of course, I married an artist. but it was interesting. They somewhat supported the whole thing. But my younger brother Ed, he said, yes, let's do it. Let's attain cosmic consciousness. I mean, why not? Let's not waste any time here. So I just graduated from Colby. And I remember my father said, so what are you going to do? And so we thought, what do we do? All right, and we know what to do. We figured it out. If you want to attain cosmic consciousness, it's 1975. It's very easy. You go to California. I wouldn't go there now, but back then it was a good idea. Anyway, so we decided to go to California. But we decided we weren't going to just drive or fly or whatever. We would walk there. And so we would walk there with no money. We were just going to go. So I remember we headed down the driveway from my parents' house in September of 1975. And I remember we walked, and we had some fresh baked cookies from my mother. It didn't last too long, but we kept going. And somehow, after about maybe 3 weeks, we had gotten as far as Buffalo. And in Buffalo, it was getting cold. It was October then. And I remember thinking, we forget this going west. Well, let's just head south. So we turned south, and we just walked about 10 or 15, 20, about 20 miles a day all the way down through upstate New York, and then all the way across Pennsylvania into West Virginia. And then they said, boys, you're in the Bible Belt. Remember that, the first little town when we crossed the line, because we usually would sleep on the floor of a little church somewhere, a little town, and they let us sleep there, and then we'd go on. And they said, you're in the Bible Belt now. And so we found out what that meant. And we kept going because we didn't have any money. We were just, meditating. And I had heard of this practice by Ramana Maharshi in India. He said he encouraged people to do what he called self-inquiry, which is to ask, who am I? What am I? Go deeper with that question. So I was just doing that. What am I? What am I? Who am I? Walking along. And it was amazing how we were taken care of, really. I mean, by some miracle, we didn't starve to death, and we kept going. And we got into eastern Kentucky, into Appalachia. We had very little, people had hardly any money there. They were really tough. But But I remember one time they asked us to speak to the Sunday school, and we got there on a Sunday morning, and so we told all the kids, it's true what Jesus said, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and everything else shall be added unto you. The most important thing is the spiritual path. If you just put that as your number one priority, everything else will fall into place. Because we really were feeling that was so true. We were just focusing on what's the spiritual truth of our true nature. And I remember one day we were, the only time we were really hungry, really like hadn't eaten for a while, and there were 2 sandwiches wrapped by the side of the road as we walked along. But they gave us some money. They gave us $30. They gave us $30, and for speaking to the Sunday school. And like, wow, okay, thank you. And we went on, and then we went and had lunch at a little restaurant, and that cost about $12 for 2 people back in 1975. And we gave the waitress an $18 tip, and we kept going because we just felt we don't want to hang on to anything. Let every day take care of itself. And we ended up eventually in Tennessee at a community called The Farm. And The Farm in 1975 was the largest hippie commune in the world. And they were pretty much all from California. All these hippies from California, they came out there. And so we stayed there for a while, but we eventually thought we wanted to meditate more because that was a lot of just work. And we ended up walking down to Alabama. Believe it or not, we heard there was a Zen center in Alabama, in Huntsville. So we ended up at this Zen meditation center, and we could just meditate all day. And we were doing that, and then eventually ended up in California, eventually shaved my head, became a Zen Buddhist monk in Korea. And then eventually decided to come back to the United States, and I got my Ph.D. at Berkeley. I taught college for quite a few years. I met Madeline in Switzerland, and discovered unity early on when in Huntsville, and then I was in Atlanta, and I realized that unity is an incredibly precious vehicle for the teachings, because with all that meditation, I spent thousands of hours sitting in full lotus on the floor as a monk in Korea, from 3 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock at night. Took a vow of silence for 3 months, and just all these intense practices. But at the end of the day, what Charles and Myrtle Fillmore are teaching is exactly it. It's just really the truth that we have within our grasp, each one of us, our liberation, and the key to help everyone to freedom, awakening, and healing. It's just about understanding that, doing what Jesus said, loving each other, loving God, and love each other. And each other means everyone, all beings, animals, humans, future generations, ecosystems. Really live our life as best we can to be a blessing and send that out into the world. And so I just want to close here. I want to thank all of you for your wonderful efforts to help bring the teachings to life, because when we come to this earth, if we can do that, if we can do our best to actualize this and also to build a community that helps, encourages others to do that, we will have lived our life well. It goes by quickly, and Madeline and I sometimes smile when we remember that not too long ago we heard an interview with the oldest living human being, a woman from Japan who was 119 years old, and they said, you're the oldest living person right now on planet Earth. What's it like? And she said, it goes by very quickly. So that's an important point. So, I have to say, I became a vegetarian and then a vegan, and I say it was the smartest thing I ever did besides marrying my wonderful wife, Madeline. We've been married now 33 years. I'm so blessed, and the beautiful art and paintings we get to just go to Unity. We've been going to Unity full time now, for like almost 40 years. And I think I've been to more Unity churches than any human being in the history of the world. And I love it. And Unity is a fantastic movement, and it's really inspired by people like you. So I'll just close with this final little note that the Buddha, when he was toward the end of his life, he said, there's three jewels. And actually, this is the teaching that came later, but the idea that there's three jewels in the Buddhism, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So the Buddha represents our inner awakened nature, what we would call in unity the inner Christ, right? The truth of our being, it's eternal. The Dharma is the teachings that help us to awaken out of the mass illusion to the truth that we are. And the Sangha is the community of people who are interested in propagating the teachings and cultivating the awareness of the inner Christ. So he said something interesting, though. He said, if there is no Sangha, there will never be any Buddha or any Dharma. So the Sangha, really the community, that jewel, is in a way the most important, that needs the most support. It's the most fragile in many ways. And so the teachings and the Buddha, but they really keep the community alive, keep the teachings alive, and live these teachings ourselves is a great gift. So I can see that I'm kind of out of time. I'll stop here and turn it over, I think, to Reverend Beth for the next thing. Thank you very much, everyone. Bless you all. Thank you so much. Thank you.